Okay, so yeah, I'm talking about a way to make it sure that you get a stable interface for your Linux system host, and it's called Linux System Vaults. Anyone already has heard about Linux System Vaults? So please raise your hand if you have. You have? Okay, great. So afterwards, a lot of more people will know. And the question is, do you have to maintain Linux servers? Anyone? And do you also have to run different releases in production? Or, like, for example, CentOS 6 and 7? Or and then you probably know this problem that you also see when you need to upgrade that you have to adjust for all these subtle changes that you don't really care about, which are just like the base configuration. And of course, to manage this, you can use configuration management and automation tools, but they only make it a little bit easier for you because you have your configuration in a central place. What's still often missing is like the abstraction about the different systems. So for example, there is a little bit of unique configuration in Ansible where you have a package module or a service module, which doesn't really depend, or they don't express which package, tool, or service you want to manage, but it just works depending, regardless of your distribution. But something like this, just for a little bit broader scope, is missing. And this is what we are providing with the Linux System Vaults. So currently, we already have vaults to provide you with network configuration, SE Linux configuration, also time synchronization and Cahyna. And we are also planning a few other vaults, which are like all the basic settings that you need in a system, or that everyone needs in a system, and that you can then use to build your tailored solution on top of this that's special for you. For example, running web shop or providing all kind of other services to someone else. And by using Linux System Vaults, you can then benefit from collaborating on managing all these subtle or on these base settings, and also benefit from best practices that others might be knowing. For example, you would only want to have time synchronization for your host if you're running a web server, and don't really care, is it NTP or Cronny that's providing the time synchronization? But once you're invested into configuring NTP, it's very unlikely that you will just change to Cronny without having special needs. But at the same time, you could already benefit from the better support or the better handling on time synchronization if it's really easy for you to do this. At the same time, you get the advantage that we do a lot of CI testing on all of the changes in the Linux System Vaults project, so you can rely on everything continuing to work on the different releases. So this is an example of a pull request where you first check, does it really work for all the images that you care about? And then at the same time, we also do periodic checks whether changes in the configuration continue to work. And I myself, I'm embedded in the network services team at Red Hat. And there I'm responsible to maintain the network vault. And I'm closer to the network team to really make sure that I know of all the subtle changes that might require adjustments for the Ansible vault, and then can provide them to you. So next we will see a small example about the network vault, and I will use it to illustrate some of the design decisions we made with the System Vaults project and also the problems that we face. So this one will just configure DHCP on the ETH0 interface and the role. So I didn't write the line to actually run the role, which is just import the role as a task or specifying the role. It looks for configuration variables that are prefixed with the subsystem. So in this case, it's network connections. And there we get a list of all the network connections. One important example is that it configures the profile, not the interface itself. So it would be possible to configure different profiles for one interface, which might be useful if you would like to switch your network configuration from one profile to a different one, but only at a later point and not at the current point. So then you need to be able to express that the current configuration should be up and running, but there's also the next configuration that should be active when you reboot the system. And to express this, usually in Ansible, you only know one state. What's this? One state parameter. But we realized that we need two parameters because if you, for example, express present with the state, what does it really mean? Does it mean that the configuration is on the system but not running? But what if you want to like it running and be present, then you would use up. Then the next thing is maybe you want the configuration there but not persistent on this, and then you cannot express this anymore with just one single variable. And then with two settings, it allows you to express things like this. And also this then allows us to, for example, add this profile, which doesn't have a name, and therefore it will just match every connection profile. And this allows you, when you're using configuration management, to really benefit from it because you can ensure that all the configuration you have in the YAML configuration is authoritative for your system, and there's no other configuration laying around on the system, but it will be removed when you apply the state. Currently, we already provide a lot of interfaces in the network wall, but we also have this other wall which is for SE Linux configuration. One example is, for example, if you need to make the SSH service on an alternate port, like 2222 in this time, and here you again have a similar problem, how to make the configuration authoritative, because here you do not specify what happens with other port configurations. Should they be removed or should they not be removed? Ideally, I'm a fan of having the full configuration in the system to really make sure that you benefit from it, probably, but at the same time we don't want to break your systems. Therefore, in this case, we also have a settings where you can say remove all the other configurations, which is, for example, also important if you have different playbooks to achieve a task, and they need to change the SE Linux configuration, and then you want by default to not purge all the other systems, which is also the default, so you can express it with yes if you want to do this. Other supported features that we have are booleans, SE Linux booleans, where you can configure your system, file context, and of course basic SE Linux configurations to even disable SE Linux if you want to do this for some reason. Now this is another example how you can configure time synchronization. And I already told you initially we have support for different providers. So I forgot to mention this with the network role, which supports both init scripts, which is the older configuration system that's only available in older Red Hat or CentOS releases, and network manager, which is the newer solution. And with time synchronization, we have a similar change where NTP-D was the old or initial solution, and then later came Cronny, which is a better one. And therefore, the system will automatically use the service that is running. But you can also specify, for example, the service that you would like to explicitly configure if there are, for some reasons, if there are specific reasons why you need, for example, NTP and cannot live with Cronny. Or at the same time, you can also, there's also a variable that you can use to specify that you would like to use the backend that's specific to your distribution, or that's recommended to your distribution. The next example that I would show you is the storage wall. So this allows you to configure pools and volumes on the pools. For example, LVM volumes, and then an LVM storage pool, a volume group, and then on top of this, different volumes. It would also be possible to configure additional mount options or the file systems that you would like to have, and of course the mount point. And this is currently work in progress, so if this is something that would be useful for you and you have specific use cases, we would be very happy to get your feedback on this. And now, again, it's time for a short demonstration. So here I have Fedora 29 system, and I have, I'm not in the directory. So here I have my example playbook. Can you, for example, configure different RHEL releases, and then I will just set up a management network connection, a bond connection with 2 links, and remove all the other configuration, set up a specific time synchronization server, and also set up the storage pool that we saw earlier. And here, that's something that I always skipped on the list because it's not specific to the system roles. I just import the roles to, so that they can do the actual work. Now when I run the playbook, maybe if you can catch it directly, we will see that it differs a little bit between the different systems, because it then checks, for example, is Network Manager running or is something else running. And then it applies the different changes. Here we see, for example, it selects which NTP provider to select, and then configure NTP or Cronny. And in the end, we will also see a lot of output for the storage role. So this is the time synchronization for all the different options that are there. And this is basically all the work that the system role takes care of, so you don't have to worry about this if you don't care about the underlying details, but just want the base configuration, for example, for storage or network configuration. Okay, it seems there was a little bit of a problem for the RHEL 7 system. I think we don't need to look into this, but in general, it just works fine. The system roles currently, they are also available as a package in RHEL or CentOS as RHEL system roles. And you can also will be able to install it soon on Fedora with Linux system roles. Of course, for everyone else, it's also available in Ansible Galaxy as an individual. Depending on the individual role, you have to install them separately. So there's not a group package that you can install like you can do with CentOS and Fedora. In the future, we are planning to improve the storage role, where we have to figure out like what's the proper interface that we would like to expose. Then there's also work in progress for logging configuration. For example, to configure remote logging, local logging, different backends, firewall settings, which is also a challenge to express this in a very generic way, where you don't have to get too much into details. Configure matrix, and also, for example, provide the best practices for running SAP HANA on an enterprise system. Challenges that we have also, for example, again with partial settings. For example, if you want to, you cannot use the network role currently to just add an IP address to a configuration, because it's only granular at the configuration on the connection profile interface. You either have to specify the full connection profile or not specify it at all. And also a problem with the timestamp configuration, for example, is that that it doesn't preserve the previous settings, because then it would understand all the settings in this, but you can manage the settings that it provides you as an interface, which are usually the ones that are most important for you. With storage, there's also a challenge to make it sure that's possible, for example, to change just one attribute of a volume instead of having to remove it and recreate this. Of course, we always try to not to break the systems, because it's like really base configuration, and there are so many different use cases that it is a challenge to make sure that at the same time you provide some kind of abstraction that does the right thing, but also allow users to change what they really need. So therefore, we would really hope to get any feedback from you if this is something that you could use. I'm available via email, till@redhat.com. Then there's, again, the Linux System Roles project on GitHub that you can use. On Red Hat Bugzilla, there is the Linux System Roles or RHEL System Roles component where you can file bug reports. And so, what's your opinion? I'm really interested. Is it Does it match any of your use cases? So can you really use it? And yeah, please raise your hand if you're going to try out this Linux system roles tomorrow or the next week. No one? Awesome. I saw someone in the back, so maybe just give it a try. Thank you very much. What are your questions?